Hello, and welcome to today's AIPH Green City Briefing, the power of plants to transform city livability. I'm Jennifer Dunn, and I'm part of the Green City Initiative team here at AIPH. Green cities bring nature and plants into urban environments to transform spaces and lives for the better. Today, we are exploring how a well-planned, designed and maintained green built environment can promote and enhance positive lifestyles for city residents, visitors and businesses. Shortly, we will be speaking with one of the finalists from the World Green City Awards 2024 and the eventual winner of the Living Green for Urban Infrastructure and Livability category. The AIPH World Green City Awards 2026 is now closed for entries. But if you would like to learn more about great green city projects, check out our Green City case studies at aiph.org. Before we delve into today's discussion, allow me to give a brief overview of how today's webinar is going to work. First, I will introduce the MC, and this will be followed by our first speaker, after which we have our second speaker, which is followed by a discussion section. This is your opportunity to ask questions and contribute to the discussion. So as the presentations progress, please add your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Worshipful Company of Gardeners for their continued support of the AIPH Green City Briefings programme. And finally, as many of you already know, we capture the latest Green City news, projects, research and initiatives from around the world in our monthly AIPH Green City Global Update. So if you haven't already, please sign up via the link in the chat. Now, without further delay, please allow me to introduce John Rob Poole, our MC for today. John Rob is the Senior Manager for Nature Positive Urban Development and Urban Shift at the World Resources Institute. He's an expert on nature-based solutions and is interested in the role that technology has to play in supporting nature and livability. He works to strengthen human connection on these themes via peer exchanges and his work on partner engagement. And therefore, John Rob is the perfect person to lead us through today's briefing. So thank you again for being our MC, John Rob, and over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joined us today. A virtual warm welcome to all of you to this AIPH Green City Briefing titled The Power of Plants to Transform City Livability. What a fascinating topic. It's wonderful to see everybody who's joined us here today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. Let me start off by saying that it's going to be worth it because we have two really inspiring presentations for you to listen to and to learn from today. But before I introduce the speakers, let me start by introducing myself and my own interests in this topic. As I think Jen said, my name is John Rob Poole, and I'm the Senior Manager for Nature Positive Urban Development and Urban Shift at the World Resources Institute. World Resources Institute, or WRI, is a global research organization working to improve people's lives, to protect nature, and to halt climate change. And we do this by working on three major transitions that we must get right in the coming decades, namely the food, land, and water transition, the climate and energy transition, and the cities transition, the last one of which is the one that connects all of us here today. At WRI, our cities program is dedicated to shaping a future where cities work better for everyone, and our work enables more connected, compact, coordinated cities by catalyzing innovative solutions across various sectors, including transport, urban development, road safety, air quality, water and heat resilience, buildings and energy efficiency. And we do this with the leadership and the support of our 500 experts and staff who work across 13 different countries around the world, making cities a better place to live for people. At WRI, I'm fortunate enough to lead a program called Urban Shift, which is a 5-year global environment facility funded project working with 23 cities in 9 countries around the world to build capacity for them to adopt integrated approaches to urban development. One of which is directly related to the topic of today's briefing, how to incorporate and leverage the power of nature, of plants, trees, grasslands, wetlands, rivers and streams, urban forests, and even built green infrastructure like green roofs and walls into traditionally siloed city planning and urban development objectives so that we can increase climate resilience and improve the livelihoods of people who call cities home. So I'm really excited to moderate this session, and I want to highlight two additional reasons. The first is the power of peer-to-peer learning between cities, which webinars and briefings like this offer. In Urban Shift, some of the most meaningful breakthroughs that we've seen haven't come from reports or tools, but from city practitioners talking directly to each other, sharing what worked, what failed, and what they do differently. And that kind of very honest, practical exchange accelerates progress in a way that few other learning formats can. And second is because the topic of extreme urban heat, which couldn't be more urgent right now, it's the fastest rising, deadliest climate-driven risk that cities face today, is so topical. And plants, vegetation, trees, green infrastructure are one of the most effective tools that we have to increase the resilience of our cities to this urban heat crisis that we're facing. I think people know that vegetation cools cities much like an air conditioner does through evapotranspiration, and also trees add the critical benefit of shade, which can reduce perceived temperatures. So these are a couple of reasons why the power of peer exchange and the power of plants is so interesting to me. And why I'm really pleased to moderate today. And with that, let me not take any more time and introduce our first speaker. So the first speaker is Dr. Thendo Mafame. Thendo is a lecturer in human geography and urban studies at Sol Plaatje University in South Africa. Her research explores placemaking, participatory urban governance, and inclusive public spaces in rapidly transforming township environments in South Africa. And today she will be sharing some research about designing public spaces for people, livestock, and green infrastructure. Thendo, if you can turn on your camera and join on the virtual stage, please. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the virtual world that we find ourselves in, you are just not sure that you are doing the right thing. But with that said, well, our research, as John Paul have mentioned, is that we are going to share some of the preliminary findings that we have. And before that, I just want to thank AIPH for the opportunity to contribute to this important conversation on green and resilient cities, because in many African cities, we find ourselves with a pressing question of how do we design urban spaces where ecological system, human communities, and even livestock or any other animal can actually coexist sustainably. With this, we usually see that, there seem to be an unusual in global conversation on green cities, but for many African urban area, livestock, in our research, especially cattle and goats, are not only a rural phenomenon. So mostly people will think animals is something that is left in the rural area, but it's have also become an active part of urban life, and it have formed part of what is cultural identity, prestige, and also livelihood. So I'll be sharing the insights from Kimberly in South Africa and how we are trying to test placemaking approach can help us to transform this livestock related challenges into opportunities for ecological restoration, building inclusive public spaces, and also trying out the nature positive solutions. Moving on, well, if we think about most of our African cities, is that of course there's competing pressures in African cities. They mostly face the fastest urbanization across the world. So with this rapid growth, of course, it's creating a massive pressure on land, on resources, on government structures. But at the same time, we thought like with more and more people living into the cities, and when this urbanization that we're speaking about, they say more people will actually be in Africa, meaning the cities in Africa will be the mega cities of the future. And this is just some of the snapshot to show you. So with our research, we say, when you look into the complex challenges, you find this intersectionality between livelihood needs, environmental sustainability, and urban planning and regulation. Livelihood needs being that countless urban dwellers, we are finding that now they are raising livestock to provide crucial income, food security, and also to buffer yourself against economic shocks. So this also not only supports informal economies, but it also goes with the cultural practices. With the environmental sustainability part, we find that the unregulated presence of livestock in urban areas, of course, it can cause a lot of problems, especially when it comes to environmental degradation, greenhouse gas emission, and just overall and ecological health of the city. But most of the time, you find that with urban planning and regulation, municipalities often struggle to integrate these livestock farming into urban agriculture. So all these parts are not really in the formal land use plan, so which results in conflict over space, inadequate sanitation, public health concern. So with these three forces, we say even though they present direct tensions, they are actually trying to show us that maybe this is how the African cities are going to look. They will have components of the rural area into the space. So with today's topic, we say why this conversation matters. Well, in cities like Kimberley, for example, informal settlements, they're expanding just like anywhere else in South Africa. Land scarcity is highly intensified, municipal system facing pressure, and livestock keeping, it's not going away. It persists because it supports food security, like people are able to have access to meals which they need. It's access to close protein that you can have and affordable. Another thing is cultural identities. In South Africa, livestock is embedded into social practices and community heritage. For example, for marriage, this is a picture from Instagram, and you can see that's a bride and the groom, and they're happy with the cows, meaning those cows might have been used for bride price. So whether it's rural or urban, people still want to have this practice. But yes, we are acknowledging that when you have animals in the urban area, things like soil erosion, they start getting impacted, overgrazing in the urban area, and also disease spreading. For example, when you start getting goats in close proximity to the houses like this, your goats can be eating your clothes and also be living the disease. So with the human-animal conflict, you find that accidents, property damage, and also now the government doesn't know where to touch, because to say the animal must go away from the city, you are touching into a person's identity in terms of that person needs the animal to be there. So this is just also another snapshot where you get animals crossing the road, meaning when you're driving, you must be careful. So what now have Kimberley municipality done? As you can see, Kimberley, we are not a very popular South African city, but if you're interested on diamonds, you will know where we are. So we are here and we are located in the Northern Cape. So what the government here have been trying to do, or local government, which is municipality, they have been trying to provide commonages designated for grazing land. And these have been done mostly for the emerging farmers. So with this also, why this have been important is because in Northern Cape, as compared to the rest of South Africa, if you look into the grazing capacity, Northern Cape have less grazing capacity because it's actually a semi-arid area. So we are mostly in the desert. So you can see that with the yellow, it means that we have close to nothing for grazing, meaning they need to be spaces created for grazing as compared to the rest of South Africa, where animals, they will have plenty of food. So with the now strategies of the commonages, it's not something which is new in South Africa. It dates back to the 1900s, where it was being used as land allocated for the poor white resident for the grazing of the animal. But now, today, in the post-apartheid era, is that we are finding that commonages now are being used as governance system to transform some of the farming. So they are actually being used to support some of the emerging farmers. But with this also, we find that there's multifunctionality of the space, ecological, social, and economic infrastructure, which brings the challenge and the need to create new models for co-management, because in a commonage, though it's a shared land, people most of the time find themselves that they are not really adhering to the protocols. So just to show you here in Kimberley, we are like almost in the middle of South Africa, that Kimberley has 4 commonages. So you can see that these commonages are on the urban edges. So there's about 3 that are in close proximity to the city. So this is the Kimberley CBD, and you can see a commonage here, 2, 3. But the most interesting commonage for us is also this one here in the south, which is closer to the airport. And I will tell you now, so the commonages, this is how mostly they look. So in a European space, it's divided plots, more like the allotment plots. So you find them that they look like this. You can keep a little shed for the headers, and then the space is divided. But animals don't eat here. So the headers take them out. And now this picture here is the commonage which is here in the south. So you can see that besides being closer to the airport, this commonage is directly opposite a residential area, meaning no matter where the animals are going, they're actually passing through the residential area, through to the school, and sometimes possibly on the airport road. So with this now we understand the environmental, that these have the environmental and social impacts, that trying to balance the tension of environmental impacts with the social benefits is that livestock, yes, remains a form of social capital, especially for households without the stable employment for food security. But now, when you try to look into soil erosion, vegetation loss, possibilities of water contamination, is that now this is when we are rethinking how can this commonage space be looked into, especially when we are using the well-known theories of placemaking. So placemaking in urban planning space is a people-centered approach that the design focuses on creating quality public spaces that strengthen community connection, promote health, and enhance local identity. So sociability, uses and activity, comfort and image, and access are all the elements of placemaking. So we are saying in places where there's tension between urban planning, livestock, and ecological synergies, we can try to get all this together and use this model of placemaking as a catalyst for innovation that can try to create adaptive solutions that are rooted, of course, in local realities than imported models from the global north. And further, what we are recommending is that if placemaking is form part of the governance tool, is that instead of viewing them purely as grazing land, these commonages, we can start to redesign them as multifunctional urban green spaces. This includes training the commonages into biodiversity corridor, using them as areas for stormwater ecosystem, community farming hubs, training sites for emerging farmers. So this is because now if you are using placemaking model, it will allow you to have that process of co-production where communities, municipalities, planners can be able to come and share the knowledge into how you can actually improve the biodiversity of the space. So this is where the core governance, it becomes an important element to create that sustainable space. So our recommendations so far, this is still a developing study. We are working on it. So our recommendations are based on that. If we are trying to have or create nature-based or nature-positive cities, we are proposing 5 pathways that the livestock can be integrated and ecological health and public space can be redesigned. So there should be proper ecological management where you can introduce rotational grazing, carrying capacity assessments, and also try to restore degraded areas with drought-resistant vegetation. Connecting also commonages with green infrastructure where you can connect a stormwater system, create biodiversity corridor, and try to also use some of the climate adaptation models. So these also go with establishing collaborative management between communities, farmer, and the municipality, but at the same time, valuing that support in the value chain system. For instance, the manure composition, the small-scale dairy, local markets, all these can be part of the local circular economy into the city. So now what we are calling to action is that Municipal commonages are not an under-recognized asset for building a nature-positive cities, especially when you're looking into Africa as a whole. These commonages, they can be able to support biodiversity, resilient local food system, inclusive economic participation, if they are managed strategically. With placemaking, since we come from the academic space, is that with placemaking, it can provide a pathway to transform historically contested spaces into collaborative, multifunctional public asset. So in our research, we are trying to invite practitioners, policymakers, and researchers to rethink urban planning in Africa with the realities rather than imposing development models from elsewhere. So we are saying, let us use what we have and try to build our green cities around it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Thendo. That was a really fascinating presentation. Thank you so much for also sticking to the time. It was really interesting to learn how culturally important livestock in South Africa, and I'm sure that this applies to a number of different countries around the world, also can and should be integrated into planning for green areas in cities such as the commonages in Kimberley, to build more nature positive environments for people, for livestock, for cities themselves. And I thought that this concept of using placemaking as a governance tool rather than just as a theory to better utilize the commonages as an asset for green and resilient urban spaces was also really, really innovative. So thank you so much for sharing this here. I'd like to move us on in the agenda to our next speakers, coming all the way to us from the city of Baia Mare in Romania. The first of whom is Sorin Pop. Sorin is a researcher and development and innovation management expert whose experience spans GIS, machine learning, and technology applications to improve public processes for various EU-funded projects. And also Codruț Papina, who is an urban and landscape planner and a PhD candidate at UAUIM Bucharest in Romania, with a focus on the development of urban peripheries, biophilic cities, sustainable approaches on how cities can grow and transform. So Codruț and Sorin, they are going to be presenting about the Smart Post-Industrial Regenerative Ecosystem Project from Baia Mare, which won the Living Green for Urban Infrastructure and Livability category of the AIPH World Green City Awards in 2024. So very exciting presentation for us to learn more about, project for us to learn more about in this presentation. Codruț, welcome to the stage, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, John, for the introduction. Present the journey and the story of SPIRE Baia Mare. SPIRE, which is Smart Post-Industrial Regenerative Ecosystem, this is the full title. It's a project funded under Urban Innovative Actions, a former program which is now closed from European Union, but which lives now with a different name, European Urban Initiative. To put in short, this initiative is funding experimental approaches in cities, ideas that would not be funded in other way because they had, I don't know, higher risk of using the money. This was a perfect opportunity to solve and explore some of the biggest challenges of Baia Mare city. In a nutshell, this presentation will have two parts. The part one, using nature, and part two, leveraging technologies. I will start with the first one, which is nature. Just to mention here, I represent here company Urba Sofia, and Sorin is representing company Indecosoft, but the project was implemented in a consortium led by the city of Baia Mare, together with Aris Transylvania, Metropolitan Area Baia Mare, University of Agronomy Science from Cluj, Romania, and Green Energy Cluster from Romania. So this was the partnership that helped carry on this project, which went for 4 years into implementation since 2019 up until 2023. So we start with the topic commissioned by the call, sustainable use of land. And we put our problem how we can explore nature-based solutions in Baia Mare. But in order to do so, we need to start from the context. We need to start for the problem. Nature-based solution starts with contextualizing what the city and the territory deals with. And the major challenge that Baia Mare has is heavy metal pollution, which resulted from the past industrial and mining activity. An activity that went for years and years up until 2012, where the last activity ceased, but it left a heritage of heavy metal polluted land. And the society and the community struggle with this transition from industrial city to post-industrial city and how to recover from this. And this is where SPIRE jumps in with innovative ideas to help communities to recover the degraded sites and offer flexible and adaptable solutions to mitigate the environmental provocations, the social provocations that the people have, and also the economic recovery in a way. There are three pillars of the project: using nature to recover the polluted land through a method called phytoremediation. Then we ask ourselves what we can do with this biomass that is growing. So using biomass for energy or for materials. And the third pillar is the digital tools, which goes transversely into planning, decision making, and community involvement. We wanted to create, and we tested the local value chain from growing the plants, using phytoremediation to clean the soil, recovering on a long term these degraded sites that we had, the pilot sites, harvesting the biomass, testing to see, can we use this biomass for energy? Yes, we can, in a way. Can we use this biomass for materials? More difficult, but is relevant. All together in a sort of a framework that helps socioeconomic regeneration. We had 5 pilot sites that we intervened on, and with this opportunity of having these sites, we want to see how they can be recovered by the communities and elaborate a long-term vision of becoming ecological public spaces in the future. And we had a process in which we defined the provocations, the needs, the requirements, how these sites can be accessed, what are the values to be kept, how can it be transformed. So in the end, through this process of working with the communities, we elaborated technical plans in order to actually use phytoremediation capable plants to clean the soil. But this process went also towards co-implementation and involving communities into transforming the site. So a big ingredient for us was involving people from the get-go in all stages of planning. And these discussions led to long-term transformation visions of the sites, which now are in the first stage of cleaning with the heavy metal polluted soil with these plants. Through this pilot of having 5 pilot sites, which some 7 hectares, we ask ourselves, how can we upscale this as a standard practice at metropolitan level? Can phytoremediation become a standard practice embedded in local urban planning normatives, projects, regulations, and so forth? And we started the study at metropolitan level, participatory process again. We analyze the context. We try to see what are the patterns, where do these heavy metal polluted soils concentrate in? And we realize that there is no model that we can elaborate. It's totally unpredictable where heavy metal polluted soils are, even in nature-rich areas. We took soil samples all around the metropolitan area, and we identified alarming levels of contamination. So after this experiment, we concluded that more or less the entire area is affected. So we have to find solutions to embed our plans that we know phytoremediates on a longer term, 20, 25, 30 years, but to embed these plans in the future investment and projects of the city. And how we can do that? To create an NBS toolkit, which we divided the plans that we tested on different categories. Plans for phytoremediation of abandoned degraded areas, species for biomass production, which grow very fast and you can harvest the biomass for materials or energy, and species for public spaces, developments, and individual gardens. But starting from these plans, we ask what are the mechanisms. So on the first phase of metropolitan transformation, we elaborate a series of pilot investments. Then we assessed what are the land use regulations that we can develop or make more detailed in order to welcome these plants into future developments, and what type of local policy measures can be held. And then we elaborated just from this one nature-based solutions of using plants to phytoremediate the soil, we elaborated a toolkit of different solutions which are meant to upscale and make phytoremediation a standard practice in the metropolitan area. And in the end, through this process, we ended up with these master plans, which are also embedded in our digital platforms, which hopefully are used by the localities in the metropolitan area to recover the degraded sites they have and embedded in their urban planning projects. This is where my part ends about nature, and Sorin will take over.
So one of the components of the SPIRE project was that the future is green and digital, and we needed to transform the former mining capital of Romania, because that's what Baia Mare was, and of course the former pollution capital of Romania, into a greener, brighter city. So besides doing all the nature-based solutions and phytoremediating soil, we also needed to provide proof whether that process works or not. So our first idea was very simple. We're taking satellite imagery, and based on that imagery, we will assess whether everything works. But then we got into trouble, just like Mike Tyson used to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So we got punched in the face because we started planting. And the moment we started planting, our satellite indices were screwed up because everything was different due to the smaller plants than the initial vegetation, to the fact that some of them grew faster or slower, and to the fact that there was a lot of free space between our plantations. So that didn't work. And we also realized that the amount of data we have from satellite platforms is limited, because we actually had 1 or 2 good images per month in a favorable scenario. However, we imagined that we still can use Earth observation for something. And we have this mapping that we created using Earth observation of all the vegetation in the Baia Mare metropolitan area. And we identified that one of the plants available there is called Japanese knotweed, and that plant thrives in the most polluted sites. So we reversed engineered this process, and we realized that it is a very good pollution indicator. So besides the fact that this plant feeds on lead and other heavy metals, it also indicates the areas where those metals are present. In order to correlate this, we started doing measurements of soil and plant pollution, and we started mapping them. So with the help of the Cluj University, we have a lot of baseline data, and then newer data that showed the progress and that we could then emulate into a phytoremediation calculator. So we discovered that for the most polluted areas of the city, we actually need about 50 years of phytoremediation in order to get back to normal usage values. We found out that some of the heavy metals that which contaminate our area are easier to get rid of, and some others are very difficult. We also identified the fact that the phytoremediation process is non-linear, and depending on the starting value, it can be slower or faster in some of the periods of time. So using the SPIRE City website, if you have some measurements of your local conditions, you can assess the approximate time frame needed for your soils to get to normal values or sensitive usage values. The Metropolitan Master Plan that was already mentioned has the same, started from the same issues. We know that we have a lot of pollution. We mapped with support from the university the polluted areas. We have the values, and we have proposed a projects portfolio that takes into account the local conditions, including nature's access and the need for usage of every terrain area in the metropolitan zone. Another very important component that we found is that besides phytoremediation, which takes a lot of time, as shown before, we need to get people on board, because otherwise we start investing in phytoremediation, and then you will see the results rather slowly compared to a fast option of digging, getting the ground moved to another location and bringing up clean soil. Of course, the phytoremediation actually cleans something, while the traditional method only has the option of moving the problem from one side to another. So this is where the ILEO comes into place. And the ILEO is a reward system that empowers the citizens. They get on board because they're getting rewarded, both for participating in our plantathons, events where they actually planted some phytoremediating species onto the polluted soils, but also from reducing their current day-to-day pollution by leaving their cars at home and start using bikes or walking through the city, because the city is not that wide. So it's not a 15-minute city yet, but it's on the way of getting there. So people would walk or bike to their place of employment, and then they get a reward, which for now they can use in a maker's place in order to create their own projects using 3D printers, laser engraving, and other wood and carpeting equipment that they might use for their home projects or for their school projects. We had this huge success with kids from the local university that participated in plantathons, that walked throughout the city, and then they came to our makerspace for their high school or bachelor diploma papers in order to create materials that they needed. Of course, there is a higher or a larger plan. We plan to involve companies, we plan to involve NGOs, and we plan to extend the ways in which everybody can use this immaterial local environmental utility, the ILEO, the reward system. So people would get their rewards, they would be able to pay to sponsor NGOs or pay for goods and services. And in the end, everything would go back to the city as a local tax payment. So pretty much we're trying to get people on board and to create a local ecosystem that facilitates phytoremediation. So I think my timing is rather perfect.
So much. Thank you so much to you and to Codruț. It was a really fascinating presentation. I only dropped the internet connection in the last minute, so I heard everything that you shared. I think it was really special for us to learn more from your perspectives about one of the projects that actually won the World Green City, one of the categories in the World Green City Awards in 2024. And I thought it was very interesting to learn how, you are being so innovative to use plants to remediate environmental pollution in the Romanian mining capital and pollution capital, as you called it. I particularly found the section about the ILEO system and how you are incentivizing public engagement, also very, very interesting here. So thank you so much. I want to move us into the Q&A section, and I'd invite Thendo to join us on the screen here. And I want to give some space here, 10, 15 minutes or so, for us to go through a few questions so that we can learn more about some of the things that you've already shared with us today. Let me start with you, Thendo, and I'm just looking for my the questions that I've been collecting here. All right, great. So, Thendo, the first thing that I wanted to ask you is, what lessons can we learn from the management of commonages for people, for livestock, for nature in Kimberley from that specific work and research that you shared that can be extrapolated to other cities and towns in South Africa? And I guess an add-on to that is, are you in discussions with other cities, and can you tell us what are they learning from you and what are they doing inspired by your work?
Well, I will say that the work is still pretty much on its juvenile stage. So what we have found out that more in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, they have a more developed way of how they run their commonages. Whereas here in the Northern Cape, because there's very little arable land, especially when it comes to grazing, it's more like they let the commonages self-govern themselves. So if you also go into the commonage space, nobody is sure who is the leadership, who owns what. So everybody just come on and bring in their animals and go on about. So we were learning more about the rules, the regulation, that if you're going to have bylaws sitting somewhere in the municipality shelf and the people who own the animal don't even know where to find that bylaw, then there is nothing that you are doing for that community, because they still take the animals where they are not supposed to be. So what we have seen is that maybe we can be able to learn also into the other city in KwaZulu-Natal, Pietermaritzburg. This is where also they are more mature when it comes to the animals and how they keep them in the commonages than we are actually here. So our work is still pretty much developing. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks so much, Thendo. And it's really interesting to hear the flip side of the question that I asked, right? Which is that you're actually you're actually taking the experiences and the learnings of some other municipalities and cities that are, like you said, maybe a little bit more developed in this thinking and this research around how to govern and include commonages as green infrastructure formally in the city. So that's so interesting. Codruț and Sorin, I'd like to ask you a similar question. Thinking about all of the work that you've done in Baia Mare, thinking about the scale of the pollution challenge, given that it's a very polluted city in Romania, what lessons can you extrapolate from the work that you've done and share with other Romanian cities or other cities in Europe also that might have similar types of environmental pollution challenges?
Okay, can I start? Sorry. In short, I think one recommendation to all cities facing pollutions is not standing pending like Baia Mare did for more than 10 years until this project came as a sort of a Hail Mary in a landscape in which the subject of heavy metal pollution became a taboo. It was already known by everyone. This was my impression, and Sorin knows better than me because I am outside the Baia Mare ecosystem for the moment. I am based in Bucharest. So I don't know, Sorin, can you confirm? It's actually, this is how I perceive it from decision makers and residents to be a sort of a taboo subject. Microphone, sorry.
So everybody knows there's a lot of pollution, and nobody wants to admit it because they want to use the land. And if they would admit the levels of pollution, some areas would not be actually usable. Mm-hmm. So yeah. The first step that post-industrial city must take is to admit they have a problem. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise everybody knows there's a problem and nobody does anything because they're scared of it. And the second key takeaway that I would share with other cities is that they might start their landscaping in such a way that they start using plants with phytoremediative capabilities. So even if they don't do it citywide or they don't do it on a large scale, having those plants in the natural ecosystem of their cities will create improvements. And it's not just for historical pollution like we have in Baia Mare, but it's also for modern daytime pollution, including, and probably most important in a lot of areas, the one produced by cars and traffic.
Mm-hmm. You took the words out of my mouth. Sorry, this was my second takeaway. I wanted to put it under the label that things are not complicated as it seems. Through a local council decision or a local law or urbanistic normatives, you can just regulate, use these plants, or we support the use of these plants in these scenarios. And in this way, you make sure that on a long term, areas that would have been planted or replanted or re-landscapes or regenerated anyway have higher likelihood of using what the territory and the environmental challenges actually require in order to be solved.
Thanks so much, both of you. Yeah, very, very rich, rich answers and perspectives that you've offered us. A couple of things that stand out to me, which is that first, acknowledge the problem, right? We have to acknowledge where there are issues that need us to address them before we can start doing so. The second one that you just articulated, Codruț, which is keep it simple, right? Sometimes simple bylaws, simple regulations. And then the third one is take control of your destiny, I guess, so to speak, right? Which is identify that you've got a problem, think about what are the potential solutions, engage the governance mechanisms that exist, and then go forth and act, right? Rather than waiting, as you said, in this case, for like something to fall into your lap. So thanks so much. I think that these are very stirring reflections that other cities that have post-industrial environmental pollution challenges, and even modern day ones, can really reflect on. So now I want to ask another set of questions, which is that I think for the success of both of your projects, monitoring the results of the interventions is going to be key. And we know that when it comes to nature-based monitoring, it takes time, right? So we know, for example, if you are planting trees, you don't get the benefit tomorrow, right? So if I go back to the example that I gave of trees to mitigate heat, if you plant a tree tomorrow, if you plant a tree today, you don't have shade tomorrow, right? In the case of the commonages, where you have to manage them collectively through the community, you know that taking the livestock off the commonage today doesn't result in it being restored tomorrow, right? So I wanted to ask you both, starting with you, Thendo, what can you reflect on the monitoring needs in your project that will define the success of it, so that you can continue to articulate the need for this kind of work into the future? And then I'll come to our two speakers from Romania for the same question.
So I think first, before I continue, I think I'm actually fascinated by Sorin and Codruț studies, because they are speaking on the Romanian city, which is a post-mining town. So we are also here in Kimberley. It is a post-mining town. So the biggest diamonds in South Africa, they actually come here, and some of the biggest diamonds in the world. So while you have that commonage strategy, it's also that there's a lot of restrictions with the land. Some of the land still belongs to the mining company. So what we have also witnessed is that also it's not going to be an easy job, because when I found out from the municipality who runs the commonage, it was a shock for me to find that the commonage, they see the animals in this city as something dangerous, so it's run by the fire department. So immediately that part of a commonage, which is an infrastructure, built environment near people's houses, it should belong to the urban planning department. Yet it's sitting with the fire department. Fire department sees it as a hazard. They treat an animal as a hazard. They have a pound. They catch your cow roaming around. We catch it. We go throw it in the pound, whatever that happens to it. So I think starting by situating the whole process into an appropriate department, that is something we are hoping to achieve. That maybe by the end of the study, we'll be able to achieve that. And how we plan to do that is that with probably additional funding, what we're going to do is that we want to try to tag the animals, give them a GPS collar to try show where does part of the animals go, and they are not necessarily staying where they have to be, meaning you have to try to create that corridor. Yes, also for us, it's not something that we can be able to achieve tomorrow, since I'm saying starting with the bylaw comes from the fire department. When you want anything about animal, you go speak to the chief of fire instead of going to speak to the head of urban planning. So in future, well, we are hoping to have that influence. I am in conversation with the municipality, and there's a possibility for me to get involved in reviewing their policy, that we're just hoping for the baby steps from there. And maybe from that, we can be able to also identify ideal space to have these commonages, because if you have a commonage across the airport, it's quite dangerous for the vehicles coming out of the airport. And also it's just not an appropriate place where it have to be. So policy, that's where we are aiming to start. Thanks.
Super. Thanks so much, Thendo. That's great. So Codruț and Sorin, I want to pose the same question to you. What can you offer us in terms of monitoring needs and your own perspectives that will lead to the success of you being able to evaluate the success of your project in the future?
So I believe there are two important dimensions where our project needs measurement. One of them is technical, and that regards the reduction of pollution. And the phytoremediation calculator that we presented is a rather good example, because now what needs to be done is for the city to check whether that phytoremediation process continues and whether it's in line with our estimations. So that just implies some technical measurements of land pollution at different depths. And on the other hand, there's the more important dimension of people measurement, where you need to see if the community is still on board with what you have done and what you are doing. So there you should measure either the actions on which they keep receiving rewards, or the general attitude towards phytoremediation and towards greening the city. And those two are measured usually by sociologists, and that's kind of closer to Codruț's expertise, I think.
Yeah, I could talk about that, but I want to make a short parenthesis concerning the monitoring of phytoremediation process, and maybe one good lessons that we learned, and maybe people that are watching us might take from this, is that working with fragmented sites, degraded areas, basically undeveloped land, we don't know what you get. And we didn't know when we started planting and taking soil samples that the heavy metal pollution and all of the layers of the soil are not even remotely equal, homogeneous. Like unusual soil structure looks like a cake with all of the layers, and for us it's like a cake in which somebody smashed everything. So if you take one soil sample here and half a meter, 1 meter far another soil sample, you get different surprising results that you cannot predict or model very, very easy. And I think this is one of the challenges that you had, Sorin, to basically make an average of all of this. So our recommendation that we put in our reports and in our strategy, if you start as a city to work with these sites and want to implement phytoremediation solutions in a local ecosystem value chain, it doesn't have to be a stationary investment. First hand, just mix the soil up, the first 30-50 centimeters of soil of the site, mix it up so you have homogeneous distribution. So in case your plants survive the same. If your plants die, maybe you reduce the chances of the plants dying, but you'll have homogeneous results and management of the sites. Otherwise, it becomes unexpected and difficult on how you do this.
Thank you so much, Codruț. It's great. Fantastic to hear your thoughts on this. We are coming close to the top of the hour when we're going to have to close this briefing. I want to ask two more brief questions. I ask that you keep your responses brief accordingly. The first one is for you, Thendo, which is our colleagues from Baia Mare shared about this ILU program, which is an incentive program to engage residents in the project. Do you see that there could be any kind of similar resident engagement incentive in your commonage work in South Africa, perhaps to do things like monitoring the rate of erosion or incentivizing the number of livestock that different people put in the commonages?
I would say incentives in South Africa, we try to stay away from that, because incentivizing anything, or when you start to incentivize work, it's almost like you are buying a positive answer. So most of the time we try to leave it to be voluntary with a little bit of support, So what we were hoping for us for next year is that maybe if we get the funding that we've applied for, we can incentivize, but we'll only incentivize people in the commonwealth. So we can say we can incentivize you with appropriate shoes, for example, if you are able to take these animals wherever way you want to take it, or can you tell us which other streets you travel to, because sometimes the people can be scared. But incentivization is actually quite very difficult. It's very difficult to deal with, and that goes for the rest of Africa, especially when it comes to research related thing, because now politics start coming in, academic ethics start coming in. So we are hoping to not incentivize, but what we are hoping is reaching more people. We are struggling to get access to those communities, and that comes with the language, the culture. In South Africa, we are super diverse. I don't speak the language here. The people don't get me. I look strange. So trying to get access, that's what we are actually aiming, that with the municipality also, you want to make sure that the municipality is already not in a wrong foot with the community. So it's been very difficult to try to get access, and that's what we are aiming to achieve going forward. Thanks.
Super, thank you so much, Thendo. And that's a very clear reminder for us about why context matters, right? Something that works in Baia Mare might not necessarily work in Kimberley in South Africa. So really, really helpful reminder for us. Codruț and Sorin, a brief question for you, which is, how has winning the AIPH World Green City Award in 2024 helped your project, if at all?
Difficult to answer because it's the year when we closed the project. I hope that through these winnings that we got, we were nominated in different events and competitions to better gain the trust and better gain the trust of decision makers. It shows that the project was good from different points of view, so not just AIPH said that. Thank you very much for this. Also, organizations recognized our work, which I think it's a good landmark.
There was a positive outcome at the level of the city hall, because as for every project that happens, there will be those people who like it and people who don't like it, even within the stakeholder group. So getting awarded and getting recognized at an international level helps people who actually have implemented the project convince the other ones that their work was actually valuable and is worth continuing and expanding on other pieces of land within the city. So I think it's very important in convincing stakeholders and especially those that are against the project or those that don't like the project, that actually very good work has been conducted and it's worth carrying on.
Super wonderful. Thank you for all of those answers. It's, I think, very gratifying for the AIPH team on the line here to hear that winning the award has helped to raise awareness, that helps to better gain the trust of important stakeholders and show the impact that your project is having. So thank you so much for sharing those reflections. I'm going to bring this Q&A to a close here and then in a minute pass over to Jennifer. I would just like to thank you sincerely, Dr. Thendo Mafame, Codruț, Papina, Sorin Pop. Thank you so much for preparing your presentations and sharing with us. I thought that they were very inspiring and had a lot of lessons that others can learn from. And I would also like to thank the AIPH World Green City Awards team for putting on this briefing today and for inviting me to moderate. With that, back to you, Jen. Thank you.
Great, thank you all so much. So thank you for joining us for today's AIPH Green City Briefing. I'd like to thank our MC, John Robb, and our speakers, Thendo Mafame, Sorin Pop, and Codruț Papina, for those fascinating and very informative presentations and the discussion that ensued. I would challenge anyone to come to a Green City Briefing and not leave having learned something new. For me, listening in today, I think one of the main takeaways was this encouragement teed up by Thendo to embrace local context and complexity as an opportunity to innovate and create greater benefit for all people involved, and that Sorin and Codruț really showed what that can look like in practice. To you, the audience from all around the world, thank you for joining us. Our next briefing, which will be the last of 2025, will be on how cities thrive with biodiversity, and this will be on December the 11th. I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. The session has been recorded and it will soon be available on the AIPH YouTube channel. We'll also share this via LinkedIn so you can share it onto colleagues, friends and family who you think might also be interested. Finally, once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors of the briefing series, the Worshipful Company of Gardeners. So until next time, thank you and goodbye from me and the whole AIPH Green City team.